Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I am a graphics engineer at Speckle, and my focus since I've joined has been developing the Speckle viewer. Uh, I'll be introducing and going over the revamp of our viewers API, which we've unsurprisingly called API 2. Uh, so let's start with the why we decided to do this in the first place. Uh, the viewer is essentially a public library available to anyone. However, it's currently too biased towards our own front-end needs. So this means that developing your own applications with the viewer is limited and a lot of times cumbersome. You have little customization options available, if any, and you can only use speckled data as input. Now, moving on to how we've changed things. Essentially, we're broadening the API. So coming from version 1, which was monolithic, uh, we split API 2 into the viewer core and a set of pluginable extensions. The ones on the screens are just a few of them. There are a bunch more, and probably more are going to come in the future. Now, the viewer core handles the internal workings of the viewer, and it offers its own API. This means that you can develop applications using the core alone if you feel you don't have any need for the extensions. And the extensions, which handle specific functionalities like camera control, filtering, measurements, you name it. All of them rely on the viewer core to function, and also each of them offer their own API. Now, with this new setup, you now can customize viewer functionalities by extending available stock extensions. And if that's not enough, you can even make your own. An additional thing that API2 brings is the possibility to load virtually any input data formats, like say OBJ, GLTF, FBX, by using customizable loaders and converters. Now, to showcase some of API2's features, I've prepared a small demo inspired by a post on our forums, where we made an extension which allows us to select objects by dragging a box on the screen. Let me show you first how this thing goes. So by holding the Alt key and dragging, you're selecting objects. So nothing surprising here is what you would have expected. Now there are two ways in which this can be achieved. The first way is by extending the stock selection extension. And the second way, which we end up doing, is by making a separate extension from scratch. Let me go ahead and walk you through it a bit. So this is a code sandbox. It's online. You can use it. I'll even drop the link in the chat. You have a typical viewer setup here. You create a viewer, initialize it, then you add your extensions. We want the camera controller now and the default selection extension. Additionally, we've added our own box selection. And if we go into it, we can see that it extends the extension type. This gets exported by the viewer library. Any custom extension will have to extend this type. Additionally, we get the camera controller automatically injected in the constructor because we specifically requested so. And also another way of getting extension is by getting them yourself, like we did here, where we also need the selection extension because how this is going to work. This extension is going to determine the objects that will need to be selected and then just tell the stock selection extension, look, select these uh, objects for me. Now, further along, we're binding to input events. API2 provides access to certain input events. Inside here, we only want up, down, and move from the mouse. Also, we're creating the box ourselves. If you go here, now by the box, I mean the actual box that you see on the screen. This is not HTML, it's rendered on the GPU. What's interesting here is that this box is created purely by vanilla 3JS, so to speak. So you have your buffer geometries, you have a shaded material, and the mesh, which you add to the 3C. The only perhaps typical 3J Speckle viewer thing here is the fact that any object that you add will have to be placed on a specific object layer. The viewer defines several layers. We chose overlay because overlay gets rendered last. Now, how this selection works in a nutshell, whenever you drag a box on the screen, what we do is we go into the viewer's acceleration structure and check to see, okay, which objects are completely contained by this selection box. If we find any, we add them to a list. And then each frame, we check, are there any IDs to select? If so, tell the selection extension, okay, clear the current selection and select our new ones. Now, we're going to do something else here. We're going to go to an older sandbox. And this demoed an example of how you can extend an extension. In this case, it's still the selection extension that we've extended. And by extending it, we've added this thing where whenever you select objects, you get this gizmo and you can move stuff around, right? So what we're doing here is going to grab it, go back to our original sandbox. We're going to create a file, call it extended selection. Just paste it in here. Then we're going to go to our main. Let's make some room. And instead of the stock selection extension, we say that we're going to want to add the extended selection. It automatically imported it. Now, this extension also wants to be initialized because that's how it was made back then. And let's see what happens now. Let's refresh. All right. So now we have the box selection functionality plus the gizmo that we can use to control the object. Say we want to select these light bulbs, we want to move them around. Okay. Now, something that we're seeing here is that the shadows don't change, right? So let's go in and fix that. Let's go here to the extent. Okay, let's find the place a new render is requested, and it's over here. And instead of leaving it by default, so by default, whenever you request a render, only the default pipeline gets triggered, not the shadows. So what we're going to do here is going to say update flags. We want to render as well as the shadows. Okay, let's refresh this. Okay. Now let's see if this had any effect. And it did. Now the shadows get nicely updated for us. That about concludes the demo. I'm going to drop the link to this sandbox in chat because, like I said, it's 100% online. You don't need to install anything. You just run it directly. Also, API 2 has been publicly available on NPM for a while now. I'll drop that link in the chat too. And yeah, I guess I'm going to pass it on to Jed, which is going to talk to us about data navigation mastery.